January 2, 2024, News Report 1. NHK reports that on January 2, a Japan Airlines A350 plane collided with a fixed-wing aircraft from the Japan Coast Guard while landing at Tokyo Haneda Airport at 4 p.m. The collision resulted in damage to the landing gear of the JAL plane, causing it to touch down on its belly and catch fire. All 367 crew members and passengers successfully evacuated using the front emergency slides, with 17 passengers sustaining injuries and 5 being hospitalized. The Japan Coast Guard aircraft, originally intended for transporting supplies to the earthquake-stricken Ishikawa prefecture, tragically had 5 out of its 6 occupants killed, and the pilot suffered severe burns. Witnesses reported hearing an explosion when the two aircraft collided, and the JAL plane turned into a massive fireball instantly. Despite the airport's prompt response with 30 fire trucks to extinguish the fire, the aircraft was eventually destroyed. Haneda Airport closed its 4 runways at 4 p.m., resulting in the cancellation of 110 domestic flights and the diversion of 9 flights to other airports. The airport reopened 3 runways at 9:30 p.m. Transport Ministry officials in Japan are investigating the cause of the accident, stating that the Japan Coast Guard aircraft was taxiing to the holding point for runway entry, while the JAL flight was landing normally. The Coast Guard received no abnormal reports or communication issues from air traffic control before the incident. Aviation experts speculate that one of the aircraft may have misinterpreted air traffic control instructions. The Japanese National Police Agency has initiated an investigation into the incident. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida expressed condolences for the Coast Guard personnel and gratitude for the JAL crew's assistance in the evacuation. News Report 2. With only 11 days left until the Taiwan presidential election, several media outlets released the final pre-election polls on January 2. The majority of polls predict that the Lai Xiao ticket is in the lead, followed by the Ho Zhao ticket, and Ko Wu in third place. A survey commissioned by TVBS on January 1 showed a slight decline for the Lai Xiao ticket to 33%, the Ho Zhao ticket at 30%, and the Ko Wu ticket at 22%. The blue-green gap is reported to be 3%. According to the United Daily News poll, the Lai Xiao ticket has risen to 32%, the Ho Zhao ticket has dropped to 27%, with a 5% difference between the blue and green camps. It is worth noting that starting from January 3, media outlets are prohibited from publishing any reports or comments related to the election, and violators face a fine of 2 million new Taiwan dollars. Experts estimate that the competition in the Taiwan election is intense, and the vote difference could be around 100,000. Additionally, as the election approaches, the Taiwanese Ministry of National Defense continues to closely monitor espionage cases. On January 2, the ministry announced the apprehension of 4 personnel suspected of espionage at an Air Force radar station. These individuals, who had previously borrowed money from an underground bank infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party, were absorbed into the CCP and sold classified information to China. On January 1, 4 PLA fighter jets and 3 warships operated near the Taiwan Strait, with 1 KJ-500 early warning aircraft crossing the median line into Taiwan's southwestern airspace. News Report 3. On January 2, the Prime Minister of Thailand announced that starting from March 1, both China and Thailand will permanently exempt each other's citizens from visa requirements. This brings significant convenience to citizens of both countries, eliminating the need for visa applications when traveling to the other. In October of the previous year, Thailand had already waived entry visas for Chinese tourists, valid until the end of February. In 2023, Thailand received a total of 28 million foreign tourists, with 3.5 million being Chinese, ranking second only to Malaysia. Interestingly, Xinhua news agency reported this news but only mentioned Thailand's implementation of a permanent visa waiver for Chinese citizens, without highlighting China's reciprocal policy for Thai citizens. This reporting approach may be intended to portray the Chinese government as more authoritative, creating an impression that Thailand is making concessions to China. In reality, it is a mutually agreed-upon arrangement, but Xinhua's reporting emphasizes Thailand's side. This serves as an example of potential bias in news reporting. News Report 4. Bloomberg reports that the Netherlands has implemented export restrictions on chip equipment starting from January 1. However, Chinese companies made substantial purchases of ASML's lithography machines before the restrictions took effect. In late last year, U.S. National Security Advisor Sullivan had called the Dutch government and ASML, urging them to stop shipping certain lithography machines to China. According to Chinese customs data, imports of lithography machines from the Netherlands increased by 18.5 times year-on-year in September, 3.43 times in August, and 16.77 times in July. In October of the same year, the U.S. government stated that if ASML's lithography machines contained any U.S. components, the U.S. would have the authority to restrict their export. Therefore, the Dutch government revoked ASML's export license last year, prohibiting the sale of the 2050i and 2100 lithography machines to China, both of which are top-notch EUV lithography machines. Computer scientist Zhang Xiaojiang from Australia commented that China's rush to purchase these devices before the ban indicates the country's considerable dependence on Western technology in the semiconductor industry. However, this buying spree also comes with significant side effects due to the high cost of these devices. News Report 5. AFP reports that the Utah State Police recovered Chinese student Zhuang Kai, who had gone missing last week, on December 31. Zhuang was not kidnapped but fell victim to an online kidnapping scam. Zhuang's family was defrauded of $80,000 in ransom. At just 17 years old, Zhuang lived with a host family. On December 28, his family reported to the American school that Zhuang had been kidnapped. They received ransom letters and photos of Zhuang, threatening harm if the ransom was not paid. The school immediately contacted the police, and based on Zhuang's bank and phone records, the U.S. police found him 40 kilometers away from the host family. Zhuang was found in a tent, unharmed. He revealed that the scammers had threatened to harm his family if he didn't comply, so he followed their instructions, hid in the mountains, and sent a photo of himself to the scammers. The police stated that this case fits the typical characteristics of online kidnapping scams, where perpetrators pose as law enforcement, isolate the victim, take photos to make it look like a kidnapping, and, in reality, simply follow instructions. The scammers then use this material to extort ransom from the victim's family. Utah State Police issued a warning, stating that scammers are targeting foreign students, especially those from China, in recent online scams. They advised everyone to be cautious, and if parents of international students receive suspicious calls or letters, whether related to kidnapping or fraud, they should report it immediately and not trust any requests for money transfers. News Report 6. The Shanghai Housing Provident Fund Management Center announced that starting from January 3, the down payment ratio for Housing Provident Fund loans for the purchase of the second property in the Lingang New Area and 6 other districts, namely Jiading, Qingpu, Songjiang, Fengxian, Jinshan, and Baoshan, will be reduced to 40%. Previously, the down payment ratio for Housing Provident Fund loans for the second property in Shanghai was 50%, making this a favorable policy aimed at stimulating real estate market transactions. However, given the current unfavorable market sentiment, the impact of this policy may not be as significant. News Report 7. According to the South China Morning Post, China and Myanmar signed a supplementary agreement on December 26 to restart the deepwater port project known as the Kyaukphyu Port Project, in Myanmar. The details of the project have not been disclosed. According to the 2018 agreement, CITIC Group holds a 70% stake in the Kyaukphyu port. Located in the southwest of Myanmar, the Kyaukphyu port provides access to the Indian Ocean and serves as a docking point for oil and gas vessels. Through the China-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines, these resources will be transported to China's Ruili. The China-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines, with a total length of 793 kilometers, pass through Kyaukphyu, Shanpa, entering Ruili in Yunnan. The gas pipeline was completed and put into operation in 2013, while the crude oil pipeline was completed in 2017. In addition to Kyaukphyu in Myanmar, China has also invested in various strategic locations in Southeast Asia, including Cambodia's Ream Naval Base, Sri Lanka's Hambantota Port, and Pakistan's Gwadar Port. This establishes China's significant strategic presence in the region. The activation of the Kyaukphyu port is advantageous for the Chinese Navy, indicating that China has opened another channel to access oil and gas resources. News Report 8. On November 2, the Taiwan Centers for Disease Control, CDC, announced that Taiwan had recorded 360 new locally transmitted cases of COVID-19 in the past week, marking the highest number in 4 months. Among them, 78% were individuals aged 65 and above. In the same week, there were 38 new COVID-19 related deaths, the highest in 10 weeks, with 90% of the deaths being individuals aged 65 and above. The COVID-19 strains detected in local cases were predominantly EG5, accounting for 69%, followed by GN1 at 14%. Among the imported cases, GN1 was the main strain at 52%, followed by EG5 at 34%. Starting from January 3, Taoyuan Airport in Taiwan will provide each passenger with a home rapid test kit. Drivers and incoming travelers can freely obtain these kits to promptly determine whether they are infected with COVID-19. This measure will be implemented until after the Chinese New Year holiday. News Report 9. On January 2, the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts in Hong Kong began hearing the case of Jimmy Lai, the founder of Apple Daily, accused of colluding with foreign forces. In court, Lai denied all charges. The prosecution alleged that during the 2019 anti-extradition movement, Lai conspired with senior Apple Daily executives to publish 161 articles that incited and colluded with foreign forces, with 31 of them published after the implementation of the Hong Kong version of the national security law in June 2020, calling for international sanctions against the Chinese and Hong Kong governments. The prosecution further claimed that starting from June 2019, Lai, under the guise of advocating for democracy and freedom, repeatedly contacted overseas individuals to seek foreign sanctions against Chinese officials, including then Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo. The prosecution presented Lai's social media posts and a relationship chart, indicating Lai's connections with political figures in the UK, the US, Japan, and Taiwan. The prosecution characterized Lai as a radical political figure who believed that foreign forces were the only way to save Hong Kong and prevent China from taking over Hong Kong affairs. Essentially, the evidence presented was Lai's published articles, raising concerns about freedom of speech. News Report 10. On January 2, the Russian military conducted large-scale drone and missile attacks on Kyiv and Kharkiv in Ukraine, resulting in 5 deaths and dozens of injuries. Kyiv experienced power and internet outages, and residents sought refuge in bomb shelters. Russia claimed to have launched 99 various missiles, with Ukraine's air defense system successfully intercepting 72 of them. This attack is part of a series of airstrikes by Russia during the invasion of Ukraine, which began on December 29 last year, with Ukrainian cities being bombed daily. On December 29 alone, the airstrike lasted for 18 hours, launching 158 missiles and drones, resulting in 49 deaths and over 160 injuries. Against this backdrop, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba called on Western allies to expedite the provision of air defense systems, drones, and long-range missiles. He urged the West to immediately unfreeze assets frozen by Russia and sever diplomatic relations with Russia. AFP also reported that Poland dispatched 4 16 fighter jets and an air tanker to its eastern border to ensure airspace security. NATO expressed concern about Russian missiles flying over Polish airspace, and Poland took action to protect airspace security. News Report 11. The U.S. Navy announced that the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group would conclude its deployment in the eastern Mediterranean and return to its home port, Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia. The fort's task will be taken over by 3 vessels, the USS Bataan Amphibious Assault Ship, the USS Mesa Verde Transport Ship, and the USS Carter Hall Landing Ship. Following the attacks by Hamas on Israel on October 7, the U.S. deployed the Ford Carrier Strike Group and the USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group to the Mediterranean to provide strategic protection for Israel. Now, the Ford Carrier Strike Group is returning to the United States, while the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group remains in the Mediterranean. This move indicates a stabilization of the situation in the Mediterranean, with Israel's military operations in Gaza largely completed, and the remaining affairs can be handled by Israel alone. The Israeli military announced the withdrawal of 5 brigades from Gaza, simultaneously taking more targeted actions against Hamas. Spokesperson Hagari stated that the war in 2024 would continue for another year, and the regular soldiers withdrawing from Gaza would undergo training to become commanders. Reservists would return to their jobs to help Israel recover economically. This indicates that Israel's operational plan in Gaza has generally progressed smoothly. In addition, Israel has initiated a larger-scale plan aimed at eliminating various extremist armed groups supported by Iran, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and Houthi forces in Yemen. On January 2, the Israeli military conducted airstrikes on Hezbollah militants in southern Lebanon and attacked military infrastructure belonging to the Syrian army. News Report 12. On January 1, the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa Prefecture, Japan, experienced a powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 7.6, resulting in 48 unfortunate deaths. Local transportation routes suffered severe damage, causing disruptions, and the entire Noto Peninsula almost became isolated. The Japanese government urgently organized a special task force of 10,000 personnel to provide rescue operations in the affected areas. Prime Minister Yasuda Fumio called for rescue operations through waterways, with Tondabayashi City being a heavily affected area. The earthquake caused Tondabayashi City to shift 1.3 meters westward, and at least 25 buildings collapsed, with 14 possibly having people trapped inside. Tondabayashi Market, a famous attraction, with 200 shops and residences, was burned down. The port of Ida in the northern part of the Noto Peninsula was affected by a tsunami, submerging an area 100 meters from the shore. Fortunately, no residential buildings were damaged. In addition, 33,000 households in Ishikawa and Niigata prefectures experienced power outages, and 19 hospitals lost water and electricity, complicating rescue and reconstruction efforts. During the earthquake, NHK's anchor Izumi Yamauchi issued an urgent appeal to viewers, urging them to evacuate as quickly as possible and seek refuge in higher places. His emergency call became a focal point of attention, later earning him the title of the Screaming Anchor. Yamauchi has a deep affection for the Kanazawa television station in Ishikawa, considering it a second home, hence his evident concern after the disaster.